Good afternoon. Good afternoon, all. Welcome to this panel discussion on open banking. Interestingly, the previous conversation as Raja, Ganesh, and Siddharth was completing, one of the questions Raja asked was, where would you bet your money as investment bankers? And I heard both of them commenting about, one of them so openly saying open banking, though it means different for different people. Another one is calling out areas which is very close to what we are going to talk about today. Almost about a quarter of century back, I think way back in 1994, Bill Gates said, banking is necessary. Banks are probably, disposable in that sense. And I don't want to take it that road, but coming to what is happening around us today, most of us are looking at banks from a perspective of more like utilities. A lot of our banking services are offered on devices, on apps, and on internet portals, which are not necessarily owned by banks. They work in collaboration, they work in partnerships, but the banking services are brought to us by partners who are enabling this for bankers as well as for customers. What has changed? And if you look at the term open banking, was there something which was closed before? Something had really opened up? What had opened up? And that's an interesting point because to me, the open banking is almost something like how the open source had come in and changed the technology landscape, right? It is considered as rocket science to underwrite loans, to underwrite an insurance policy, to find the right customer to lend. Sometimes it's even said that banks will lend you money if you prove yourself that you don't need it anymore. So there was always this gap between the one who is wanting a service versus the one who is getting serviced. Without much of ado, I know my panelists here, esteemed panelists, some of them are doing it themselves, some of them are experiencing it, utilizing it, and partnering with the guys who are actually doing it. So we will have more informed views shared by the panelists over here. I would want to start the session by inviting Sujit. Sujit represents EPFI. EPFI is one of the most promising neobanks in India. So we look forward from Sujit from a perspective of probably reflecting on the opportunity that open banking is offering to all of us, for the customer, for the ecosystem, and for the banking as an industry as a whole. Over to you, Sujit.
Thanks, Jay, for having me here. It's an interesting nomenclature which has crept into the world of financial services to talk about open banking. But if you fundamentally think about it, some form or other of banking has been open from a long time. In very simplistic terms, I mean, I think you can, or in layman terms, you can structure financial services into four aspects: deposits, payments, lending, and investments to a certain extent. We've seen investments and we've seen the payments ecosystem, for instance, take a leap forward. The spaces that have been behind the curve to a certain extent has been deposit and obviously lending for various reasons, for instance. I think now with fintechs looking at this holistically and saying that rather than servicing customer needs or a segment needs in one space, is there a way for all of this to actually come together? Perhaps to a certain extent led by Europe, which started by PSD2, and other innovations like that, which then allowed for fintechs to start crafting out what would hitherto be construed as services that you could typically only get within banking. Termed to a certain extent as neobanks or challenger banks, for instance. But I think broadly speaking, opening up of services which otherwise have been restrained either by regulation or within the aspects of banking is what's led to more of a nomenclature development in today's day and age of open banking.
Great. Sumit, it brings me to a very specific point. I would, of course, want to hear more generic view about open banking also from your perspective. But I just can't stop asking this because we've heard earlier about distribution channels, distribution becoming the most painstaking process in the entire financial services space. And that's where we've been seeing a lot of disruptions as well, a lot of improvements and how products have become accessible. Insurance, for that matter, had been traditionally, majority of our business used to come from banca as a channel, right? And it is in a way very closely guarded channel. If you are a banking insurance player, then you know where your customers are going to come from. And it's almost like customers have no other choice. Given with all what Sujit or someone else would come up with tomorrow, with a lot more options for the customer who used to be your banker customer in the past, what do you think? How is this really happening as we speak, and how, as an organization, you react and your personal views as well?
Thanks, Jeff. First of all, very happy to be here. It's a very interesting topic to discuss, lots of future implications. And rightly, as you said, from our perspective, from an insurance perspective, I think it's one of the more exciting developments that is kind of taking place. How long will it take and how long do we see it fully manifest itself yet remains to be seen. From an insurance perspective, as you very rightly pointed out, Jay, I think for the insurance business in India, distribution has been one of the main pillars of business, and banks have kind of more than a 2/3 share of that space of what is getting sold today. And I think what open banking promises to do is to allow to open up that space a little bit more. If the account aggregator and some of the other guidelines that the RBI is proposing, if they play out fully, then what it does do is that if I have a relationship with a customer and the customer kind of allows me to have a deeper peek into the kind of transaction that he or she is having, it gives me a lot more insight into what the customer is doing, helps me make that customer experience in terms of the purchase process, which is currently very individual dependent, B, complex, because insurance products tend to be a little bit complex. It is therefore at times I would call it almost daunting, the entire process of purchase. And I think what open banking promises to do is to simplify a lot of that. If I had access to that kind of data, my ability to almost create a one-click purchase kind of a solution for a customer, knowing what I do about the customer from the financial transactions and other information that is available, KYC, financial transactions, all of that, which is all very painful today. That I think could be really a game changer. Now, obviously, some tech companies might be better placed to fintechs, as Sujit mentioned, might be better placed to do some of this than old guard insurance companies. I think we are all battling that that imminent disruption that I think is playing out for a lot of us. But if I look at it purely from an insurance perspective as a manufacturer today, and as somebody who kind of fights for distribution on a daily basis, I think it does give an agent who, if I look at more classic insurance, an agent goes out, reaches out to people he or she knows or is on a reasonably good basis, or is referred to by somebody who knows them on a reasonably good basis. Now, if you can supplement that relationship with some degree of awareness of the financials of that person, and therefore an ability to customize a solution quickly rather than getting into a deep question and answer session kind of stuff, which is what happens today with a good insurance agent, I think it can extremely impactfully increase the productivity of the distribution that exists today, create a far better customer experience. Grievances and other things that we see today probably won't exist to that same extent. 3, the biggest thing, I think it takes away the bank's power to create a closed garden, right? And take it out into a more open space. And that I think is what is the most exciting thing. How it plays out, how it plays out quite remains to be seen. But at a prospect level, yes, it's a very, very exciting prospect to see how. And my belief is it's every distribution channel that we have today, whether it's lending companies doing loans and therefore selling insurance as an attachment to those loans, or whether it is our agents selling, or even customers, direct to customer proposition could change very, very significantly. I think that could be the one big beneficiary. What I could do directly to customer, to the 20 or 30 million customers in India who buy regularly online, and what I could do to reach out to them could change very significantly. So I think, to my mind, from a distribution perspective, it's a very exciting prospect.
Positive change. I think, Sumit, you brought in a very interesting aspect, which I missed in my earlier summary. Of course, it does brings in experience, and it gives access to a lot more of products to the customers. But also the quality matters, right? And it actually helps the businesses like insurance and other businesses to improve, they elevate the extent of quality of business that we do. So a lot of your mis-selling and upselling and whatever that happens in the industry today,
Right.
you would also look at this as an opportunity to solve some of those issues, not just a Me Too strategy, but to say that, look, if the quality and the product becomes differentiator, then a player like yours should be game for that, and then that's
Absolutely.
where. So that's a very positive outlook. So Monu, I had a different question, though linking to the same theme that we were trying. Secured products are different. I mean, insurance, of course, there can be a lot of straight through process and data can help a lot. But when it comes to housing finance, for that matter, or a loan against property, or any other lending product which has got a security underlying, we are not yet there where it can be fully digital, and it can't be, one can look at the same asset in a different way. You would be looking at it in a way and someone else could be looking in a different way. So do you think the opportunities open banking would throw to a housing finance kind of a segment is relatively slower paced, and we are going to take some more time to see some of those products coming to these platforms, or how are you looking at it?
Thanks, Ajay. Thanks for inviting me over as well. I think the mortgage industry, especially in India, has continued to be a game for very few people holding the pole position, and they continue to do that. And it is one of the big reasons for that has been the way the industry is structured. If you see the mission for Housing for All, and we keep on going and meeting the ministry, so they are unable to finding any financiers to really where the funding is required, especially in the semi-urban and the rural areas who are building homes. Right. So which is called PLC. It's borrower-led construction. So they have about 60 to 70 lakh homes which are not getting funded by financial institutions. And what's the reason for that? And I think open banking is an answer to that. Why? Because it is almost impossible for any lending institution, a housing finance institution, to underwrite a customer who, although is building a house, but he has no data points to do a creditworthiness check of that person, right? So I think if you see today also, the individual home loans in the country are just about 18 lakh crores.
Yeah.
That's the total size of the book, which is nothing. And what is the reason why it is not getting penetrated where it should be, how much it should be, right? And I think one of the big queries can be answered by open banking. Because of the fact that you can understand the customer much more, you know who the customer is, right? And you could take a credit decision based on multiple logics because of the open banking infrastructure being there. So to me, although housing might seem a sluggish secured product, but I think it is the one which moves the economy in a huge way. This could be hugely disruptive. That's what I personally believe. And also, it would also change the nature of the housing finance companies vis-a-vis others. Why? Because they would be as of now, why a point of view is because of the fact that this could change with the co-lending model, which the RBI has announced with this coming, and they would be service providers layered over this who could underwrite these people and actually be suppliers to the banking system, as the case might be. So to me, the real housing revolution can really come through this, because if you see the average ticket size of the large players, it hovers at near 28 to 30 lakhs upwards, which is not what the real India is. Yeah. And that's not what the kind of average ticket size of home loan is required in this country. Actually, average ticket size required is 3 to 5 lakhs, but nobody is there. Right. And very few regional players are there, very locally brick and mortar branch-led models. Why? Because there is no ecosystem. So to me, it's a huge disruption which can happen in the housing space. Obviously, you very rightly Jay mentioned that it's not just the credit underwriting. There are two other aspects, but there's a very fast things happening on that space as well, which is the land records digitization and access of that information as an open source again. Right. We do something innovatively vis-a-vis others to do access to that. But I think open banking is something going to really hugely impact housing industry for sure. I see that, and some innovation needs to come by, and you could see a whole bunch of new set of players coming in. So
Excellent.
a huge gap, which is unfilled because of this lack of information.
Yeah, I think you said something very interesting about the enabling infrastructure like land records and many other aspects that can go digital and make the pace faster, right? The other products that now we see already on the platforms, the cards, the payments, and the unsecured lending, insurance to some extent, they're all leveraging what is already available. And some of these infrastructures have come in well in advance, whatever public digital infrastructure the government of India had put in. And obviously on the land record side, there are a lot of things that are happening state to state. Centrally, there's something happening. So we hope that that comes sooner than so very soon, so that this journey becomes faster. That is what is needed, and I completely in agreement with you that housing will pull this whole transformation, and the most impactful area in financing is housing. If we can make that change, we can bring in that change and bring better access. Just one point I wanted to understand from Sujit's perspective before I move into the challenges that we need to address if we were to get all this real. Sujit, the interesting aspect about open banking is we are making it open. We are making it all like transparent, right? And to my mind, a neobank like yours, if I were to term yours as playing, Epify is going to play in the open banking space, what kind of a revenue model you would have? Because why? I'll tell you why I asked this. We are focusing on the customer's right to control his data and right to make the choices. So in no way an open bank is supposed to influence the customer decision to say that, look, you should buy this versus that, because you're giving all the information and the customer is making the choice. And there's no price for making any of the choices. There's no differential prices. So if you could help us understand what kind of a revenue model, is there a revenue model at all? What is the...
See, the revenue models are obviously thin because these are early days, for instance, and you're starting to build out, for instance, adoption curves and product services that users want, for instance. Now, the way to look at it from an open banking perspective is that there are consumer segments which I think are underserved. There are segments which, to a certain extent, want the power of more convenience or a higher standard of service delivery, for instance, which is actually missing, right? Given these two, the opportunity to monetize exists within these consumer segments to a large extent. The key aspect is that can you actually serve products which are highly customized and make sense for this consumer segment? That's the aspect that has been missing to a larger extent, because your ability to create, drag and drop, create a new product on the fly, for instance, for a consumer has never existed, for instance. So we're going by these conventional metrics of saying that cost of sales, cost of distribution, cost to income ratios, for instance. I think those playbooks will not exist over a few years from now, because you'll actually be able to serve at the power of one. But you're not going to be able to serve at the power of one if you're going to be dependent on legacy systems and typical systems and operations which are meant for a different time and era, for instance. With that, is there monetization possible? Absolutely, yes. There is fragmentation which is happening, but the reverse is also true, that you're able to bring together a plethora of services which are apt for a user. The offtake is also going to be higher, and hence the share of that revenue will be a lot more meaningful as for everyone in the industry. As if you look at spaces, just the simple fact that we all agree in the industry, for instance, that the share of adoption of most financial products is anyway low, and all of us see the upside of these products going up. So the question is, can you expand that universe rather than starting to divide a smaller universe of current adoption? I think that's what will lead to more revenue over a period of time.
Yeah. I think that answers the common question a lot of people ask me. Let's perhaps delve little more deeper into what does it take for us to drive and make this change. So clearly there are challenges about to what extent data is available and to what extent the available data can be shared. We have a regulatory framework that is coming in. And to what extent are users educated about it, and to what extent are they're not going to panic suddenly saying that, look, my information is now available to someone. So how do we see this whole challenge around data? I'm using challenge for a better English word. It's not challenge, and it's just the step that we need to cross. And to some extent, this is true, Sumit, when you were digitizing your business, you would have had the similar challenges. So within the organization, we have seen pockets of data custodianship exists, and then it doesn't move to another part of the organization where the regulation doesn't have any role to play. But then there are a lot of sense of ownership when it comes to data, whether to customer or to the players who hold it. And then there is a question of sufficiency and availability, quality, etc. How do you see this panning out? And in your mind, you think, is this going to remain a challenge, or this is going to go off very fast? Sumit, you're on mute, I guess.
Sorry, it's one of the permanent hazards these days. So I think there are multiple issues to tackle here. I think first of all is the entire thing that you refer to, which is the standardization of data. How do you standardize the data across different participants in order for data to flow effectively from one place to the other? For the plumbing to work properly, you need the flow of liquid in the plumbing to be of a certain consistency and a certain, viscousness, if I might use the engineering term in a different way. So you need that. But what you also then need is, a big part of this is going to be the certification of the participants. How are the regulators ensuring that participants in this sector have the necessary wherewithal to be able to maintain the sanctity of the data, the prevention of data theft and other things? And then some of that is extremely difficult these days. I think the biggest players in the world are struggling with it. It's to be a very big challenge. So how do you kind of certify people to be able to participate in this? And these are more on the standards and the technical side of it. But I think to be a very big challenge that is going to be is actually convincing the customer to participate in this. Is the customer actually going to let somebody else other than a bank have access to his data? Does the customer feel comfortable at all about anybody else being able to see into his financial transactions? And that, I think, is going to be a very big challenge. The challenge of adoption, to my mind, is bigger than the other things are, more technically oriented. You can find answers to those, right? But getting consumer to trust in today's time and age that the data will be fully secured, maintained, will not be misused, I think that is going to be one huge challenge in getting consumers to adopt. And that is the one where you will almost have to come across as cross-industry platforms in order to create that trust. Almost like a separate body to be able to create that belief in consumers that this is a good thing to participate in, gives them benefits. I think consumer experiences are the other thing that will happen. Will facilitate that process if the consumers believe that giving access to this data helps make them avail better of the pricing, better experience, all of that. I think that will create one set. But even before you get there, how do you get the early adopters to come in, and how do you first create that set of loyal people who are going to talk about it and who are going to say, evangelize this entire process and say this is worth participating in, is also going to be a very big challenge. So there are I would say the technical challenges, the data, the piping and all of that. There is the entire regulatory challenges, multiple regulatory entities. How are you going to, will there be a NPCI equivalent here, or what? How will it work is something that you will have to figure out. So I think there are multiple challenges there. And then eventually the challenge of adoption. How do you get customers to trust? How do they get them to believe that the data's sanctity will be maintained and it will not be misused and all? So like I said, those are the big things. They are going to take time to kind of sort out, to my mind.
Yeah. Monu, from your perspective, you think data regulatory, we have technology, I think, is no longer a challenge. It's more an opportunity. It's taking the leaf of learnings from many other areas where technology has made a big difference. Data, regulatory, people mindset, change management. In these areas, you have some clear, specific views that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah. So Jay, I think even for example, in our own journey, what we have created for our home loan customer, so we are completely on a tap through a digital journey, right? So he or she does, we do send them some links, and they click on those links and they share some feedback back to us, right? And like accessing their bank accounts, if you want to pull their bank statements, or uh, tax records or things like that. So there are different APIs available for people to make a decision, right? So I think there are two things in this. One is, if it is along the journey, then you tend to share more. For example, if you want to get access to Amazon, so you will input your credit card details in it per se, right? By default, right? So you have an Apple phone, so you put in everything, and you keep on getting messages that you don't even remember what all you have subscribed for, and they make money, right? So I'm saying is that is one part of it. The other part, what I'm saying is, we should slice India into maybe three parts. This part might start much strongly for the low middle income and below.
Mhm.
Why? Because they're absolutely out of the system. We are talking about two set of people here. People who are possibly people sitting in this room who are part of one system in this country, and there is a huge part of India which is just not there, right? So I think that's why I feel financial inclusion could be the biggest beneficiary in this, and it might go up the value chain differently. So I it could be a challenge, but there could be other ways by the government to encourage people to come in there. For example, they're not part of the financial ecosystem, so they are not getting anything, and there's only an upside what they can get out of it. Right?
Yeah.
For example, Jan Dhan account. So they didn't have a bank account at all, and today they have. So possibly, that's my personal view on this, that possibly we could have a good data source coming from the LMI and below faster in terms of acceptability to privacy or security or things like that. And as we go along, there could be certain things which could pull it up to the middle income and the higher income level standards. So my sense says is that the LMI and below should be easier, early adopters and faster, maybe out of ignorance, I don't know, but maybe out of the upside of what they don't have could be a very big play, right? So today you're using your Aadhaar card or any other information and you're sharing it very, very openly of sorts, and there can be anxieties of such documents as well. So I think we are getting into that space, that convenience can tomorrow also play out a card. So maybe you have to bring it like you're sharing the data and how convenient it is.
Yeah.
Like in the West, they say you can manage your financials better if you share the data and you know what's linking. So I'm saying the consumer has to be seen from their side, that, okay, I link all your accounts and you can see at one place what's happening to all your accounts. And in the journey, you are sharing something else. So I think two perspectives have to be seen differently, and who's using it for what purpose will get defined. It is also getting done even today as well. But we don't read the fine prints. Certain social networks are using your information or your behavior in some manner. So where is all that going, right? But you become so used to it because you see an advantage that I can connect my friends and I can communicate. So I don't see it. We are already used to it, I would say.
Yeah.
Sharing something.
And in a way, what you are saying is so true, because while Sujit Epify works on a certain segment and certain type of neo-banking solutions, I let Sujit talk a little more about that after this. I have seen a lot of fintech players concentrating on what we call as Bharat, right? And we always say Bharat is still catching up with India, because especially in financial services and technology. And there's a lot of catch up, and there's a lot of money to be made in the process. There's a lot of involvement that is needed. And perhaps, like you rightly mentioned, the resistance, the caution, and a lot of inhibitions actually are overlooked, because you are suddenly getting a lot more of services and a lot more of options in front of you, and that also in huge volumes, size and scale, and it gives you that runway to experiment with multiple things, and it also gives you a lot more runway in terms of plugging in multiple things to that whole segment and figuring it out. Sujit, I would want you to reflect on both what Sumit said as well as Monu said and what I said. As you do that, please give us your views on how the account aggregators are performing. Have they made any difference we know they made some difference in all our life, but you being the expected most beneficiary person from what account aggregators are supposed to do, just include that also in your response.
Yeah, I was just going to come into what Monu said, for instance. If you actually think about it, and this is why I think there's a opportune moment as far as fintech is concerned, or the world of finance in India is concerned, because we have multiple pieces coming together, which we haven't seen anywhere in the world, right? We've had Aadhaar, which establishes identity for us in a very simplistic way. We've had UPI independently, catalyzing payments and commerce on one side. The aspect which has been missing, for instance, is to know more about you. So I know who I know you're Jed from, Aadhaar, for instance, your identity is there. For commerce, for instance, you could use UPI. But the simple fact of who you are, what you do, for instance, to a certain extent, if you think about underwriting, if you think about wealth management, if you think about lending and all of that, that's been the part of the jigsaw which has been missing, right? And now with the account aggregator framework, hopefully, over the next 12, 18 months, as it gains more credibility and strength, you suddenly have a revolution which is possible, because three parts have come together right now. And I think the impact of that will be dramatic, right? None of us are able to visualize, for instance, how this could actually work, whether in terms of underwriting, whether in terms of being able to look at smaller ticket values, bringing in more adoption curves, customizing, for instance. We see it as being, there's been a fragmentation. I think payments today has moved virtually, into separate apps compared to what it was 3 or 4 years ago right now, right? The ability to stitch together, and I think, Monu also mentioned this fact that certain entities are sitting on large amounts of data, and there are these walled gardens which have allowed entities to be slow, bulky, for instance. I think that luxury is no longer there, right? In the erstwhile of financial services, you could get a customer in and then you own the customer for a long, long period of time. I think that ability, for instance, is going to get severely questioned, because the ease with which you could migrate, for instance, the ease with which you could carry your data across platforms is interesting. And how will the world change when you no longer are tied into a specific platform, for instance, is going to be interesting. For us, I think that we see it when you look at banking, for instance. There's this funny stat that I was seeing which said in the UK neobanking or banking system, the stat actually said the probability of getting a divorce in UK is higher than actually switching your bank account. Now, the point is that if you think of all of these changes that we are visualizing or we are seeing in financial services and technology coming together, and the India Stack actually bringing some of this, it basically gives you an opportunity to be able to create something large, scalable, highly customized for users. And we are very bullish on that, right? So I think even at the account aggregator launch, we demoed a feature, for instance, or a product that we actually thought could bring in all of your finances into one place and hence unleash the power of data. That could be very interesting. And I think newer models will start coming on, whether it's on the lending side, whether it's on the wealth side.
Excellent. I think it is still, it will continue to be an evolution because there's not going to be an end to what data and insights could do in people's life and what technology could do. And we've been seeing it all our lifetime. I think it will continue to be that way. On that note, I'll try summarize and also seek all your final views on 3 points. So one, as a conversation, this has been very interesting, and we've talked about open banking as a big opportunity, certain challenges. And the last part, which we want to talk about, we want to summarize, is about the way forward as we see. So the 3 points I wanted each of you to touch upon, and we'll start with Sumit and then Monu and then Sujit, is how soon do you think open banking is going to become a part and parcel of all our lives? I mean, today it is still at the stage where there are investments, there are some fintechs working, trying out multiple things, but we still have the incumbents taking the lion's share of what we do in financial services, right? So how soon is that going to happen? Second, as the banking gets opened, are the banks really going to get closed? Are we going to see the banks shutting down and then they're no longer going to be there? So that is the second thing. And the third thing, is India going to see a license coming regime that is going to come out, which is saying, okay, I'm going to license you all as open banks? So Sumit, your views first.
All three are extremely difficult ones to.
They
almost look like you need a crystal ball in front of you to be able to answer some of those. But on the timing frame, Jay, my belief is that I think different things will move at different pace. As I think Sujit also referred to, some things that move much faster than others. Payments, for example, is in a completely different velocity than some of the other places. So I think we will continue to see that. I think the most difficult part will be access to, let's say, somebody's saving account and current account, and saying, how does that work? But even that, in some cases, is already happening. Some players are being able to make it work in participation with banks. So I think different pieces will move at different speed, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 18 to 24 months, you would see a significantly greater degree of progress from where we are right now. Whether it will be full open banking is probably questionable, but we will see certainly a lot more progress. Going back, I think the one point that I wanted to talk about a little bit, and Monu referred to it, I think one of the big things that this could do is to actually open up the underbanked and the unbanked in a very large fashion, because today distribution to that segment is extremely difficult. Both distribution and risk management in that segment is extremely difficult. And what open banking could do is open that up significantly. And that, I think, therefore could be a big prod for the regulators to push harder on this element. Because that could open up a significantly big economic impact for the country as a whole if you were able to reach out to that segment. So that, I think, would be a big prod for why this might move at a speed faster than what we may have envisioned it so far. So broadly, that would be my take upon those questions at this point.
Excellent. Sumit, we hear you. Monu, quickly.
Yeah. So I think this would be should be there. Again, I agree with Sumit on 18 to 24 months, but I think the start would be more from a investment side of it. I think so, before it goes other way. And within that also, when that happens, as per me, the existing conventional people will first of all have the loudest advantage of it, and then it will change, right? Because once that comes, already the big guys, the big daddies are going to suck it, and then it'll change in the next 3 to 5 years. That's my view, right? That also answers the second part to some extent. Yes, the bank's future, I think, is going to be in the immediate future, might be okay. We should not miss the bus. We should be there. But eventually, a bigger disruption from 3 to 4 years will come. For sure, banks will be there. But I think banks without branches is the only way which it will be, because the margins would squeeze. The conventional way of doing things will just not exist. It will become a consumer-centric, very low margin business. So innovation will just become much enormous to survive. So keeping all those things in mind, it will have its own impact. And I think I still continue to believe the first biggest advantage is going to be the underserved point, the Bharat. That's a huge opportunity. And that might happen sooner than we expect, with the government asking people to get into it because of some other reason, because that will move the wheel for the country as well.
Yeah. No, very good. I wish if we had more time, that some of the points are actually prompting me to get in some more details. But given with the paucity of time, Sujit, quick reflection on 3 points I said. I know you obviously are the center stage of this. If you want the government to come up with a license, or the RBI to come up with a license, but quickly, what do you think will happen?
So I think, banks will exist. The manner in which banking is done will completely change. So that's point number 1. 2, yes, a horizon of 1 to 3 years could be interesting. I think there will be 2 cycles. We'll first see the first evolution, and then there'll be wave 2, for instance, which comes in. Regulation plays a critical part. I think to a larger extent, you're trying to fit a lot of innovation as per regulations made, which are perhaps decade old, for instance. I think the pace of that would have to change as within the pace of consumer choices and decisioning, for instance, which is happening today. And if the pandemic has shown us anything, I think physical branches are a luxury, and people can very well exist without it. So yeah, hopefully digital branches or digital banking licenses for a new category could be a vastly interesting proposition which could come through.
Excellent. So I think the panel is in broadly agreement with that the time for change, it is already happening, and a lot of support from the government and regulators is already there, and a potential digital banking license could happen anytime because that's the need of the hour. On that note, I would like to thank each of you for taking your time out from the busy schedule. All of you really contributed very interesting views. I'd want to hand it back to ET teams to take it away from there. Thank you.